Welcome in, listener. You're listening to a segment from the Slumpbuster podcast with Ju-Ju and Dre. Find the full episode on Spotify, iTunes, the Google Play Store, or our YouTube channel. Enjoy.
Last week, we had a lot of fun going through just that specific week's headlines. So we're going to do the same thing this week. So, starting off, let's talk about the AP Top-25 polls came out for college football. College football starting up here within the weekend. And it looks like we're geared towards another Alabama-Clemson title game, as Clemson was ranked number 1 for the first time in school history for a preseason poll. And then Alabama was ranked number 2. To round out the top 5, we have Georgia number 3, Oklahoma number 4, and then finally, within the number 5 slot, Ohio State. What are some of your kind of like thoughts going off of that? Aris, you want to start us off?
Yeah, so I definitely do see college football going to Clemson, Alabama, episode 5. It's kind of getting to the point where we're at, or where we were at in the NBA, where it was Golden State and the Cavs every year. I do think I see this, unless something crazy happens with an injury to either Tua or to Lawrence. I think that it's their league. They're going to run the show.
Definitely have the best quarterback. Trevor Lawrence, NFL executives are just drooling over him, and boy, are they beating themselves up over the fact that they can't draft this guy for another couple of years. He just looks like a man amongst boys out there. Like, seeing him rip apart Nick Saban's defense last year in the title game,
which was surprising.
Not gonna lie, brought a little bit of joy to my heart. I think that this guy is going to go far. It's like watching Andrew Luck right now. It's like watching Peyton Manning. This guy is going to be special when he gets into the league. It's going to be interesting between Clemson and Alabama. Obviously, you have 2 NFL quarterbacks in this matchup here. So Tua is also expected to go very high in the 2020 NFL draft. Potentially number 1. You're hearing the phrase tanking for Tua going on right now. But let's start with the end of his college career. Can he win that Heisman that's been elusive for the last couple of years?
I don't know. I think this is Trevor Lawrence's Heisman to lose. He is all of the rage right now. It is a 3-quarterback race between him, Tua, and Jake Fromm out of Georgia, who I love. I love Jake Fromm. He's a baller. I got to see him in that QB1 show on Netflix, and he is balled at Georgia. Without Jalen Hurts, I think it would have been Georgia in the national championship game last year, where Jalen Hurts kind of saved Alabama. But I do think this is Trevor Lawrence's Heisman to lose this year.
Speaking of Jalen Hurts, too, he is starting up over there in Oklahoma this year under Lincoln Riley. The last 2 years, the Heisman winner has come out of Oklahoma. And the last 2 years, those Heisman winners have went on to be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. Do we see Jalen Hurts making that leap in the same way that Baker and Kyler were able to?
I don't see him doing that because of Tua. If Tua can stay healthy, the Miami Dolphins want Tua. The Dolphins are going to tank for Tua. That's their slogan this year. Unless Hurts has a phenomenal year and Tua, that ankle injury kind of nags him throughout the season, kind of hampered him last year, then Jalen Hurts can probably go over number 1 overall, especially since Lawrence has to wait 1 more year to enter the draft. But I still think Tua is going to be number 1. I think he'll be good. And Jalen Hurts will still have a phenomenal year in Oklahoma.
Now, I do find it interesting Ohio State being ranked number 5. They do have Justin Fields transferring from Georgia. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. But they did lose Urban Meyer, which is a big piece there. Which brings me over to the number 7 team, Michigan. I think it's Michigan's conference to lose this year, as there's no more excuses. If Harbaugh can't get past Urban Meyer, then I think that's it for his time in Michigan. And that's coming from a guy that loves Jim Harbaugh. Like, as a Niners fan, seeing him get fired was probably one of the most painful things I've ever had to deal with in my life. But if he can't win this conference this year with everything playing in his favor, then his time in Michigan is over.
Yeah, I do think so as well. I mean, he has gone, above and beyond for the program. His recruiting is usually top 10. The record is usually really good. They're near the top. But the only problem is they cannot beat Ohio State. If you are a Michigan fan, there's 2 things that you want out of your season. You don't care if you go 0-2. It doesn't matter. 1, you have to beat Ohio State. And 2, it's national championship or bust. But the Ohio State one is the biggest one for that fan base. And so far, he's 0-4 against them. So if he doesn't this year, they might give him one more year to try. But yeah, he's definitely on the hot seat.
Yeah, and if Harbaugh does get fired, on the bright side, at least he'll have plenty of options. There'll be many NFL teams that are going to try and swoop him up and get him back in the league. Now, I just want to touch on a couple of dark horses before we move on into our next topic on this week's headlines. So Texas is ranked number 10. I kind of see them as a sneaky pick to dethrone Oklahoma on top of that conference in the Big 12. As an Austin resident, I'm definitely kicking myself that I didn't go to a game in the last couple of years. But last year, you could definitely tell the buzz around the city. This team is definitely like a year ahead of schedule last year. And now I think with Ehlinger, they're in a place where they could potentially win this conference and get into the college football playoffs. I also want to mention Oregon at number 11. Justin Herbert is a projected top 5 pick, and they are returning all 5 of their starting offensive linemen. And some of their offensive linemen are some NFL dudes there too. So this team is also going to be sneaky to sneak in from the Pac-12. The Pac-12 has been kind of snubbed in the college football playoffs the last couple of years, so maybe they can get in there. Now, moving on in today's topics, we're going to talk about this Jerry Jones and Zeke clash that happened. So Jerry Jones was asked in an interview about Tony Pollard's quality Week 2 performance, and his response was, as I mentioned earlier, Zeke, who? And this didn't really sit too well with Zeke's agent. The exact quote that Zeke's agent, Rocky Arsenio, responded with, "I didn't think it was funny, and neither did Zeke. We actually thought it was disrespectful." To which Jerry decided to respond to, "Look, I've earned the right to joke with Zeke. Period. I've earned that." Has Jerry Jones earned that right?
So I think in Jerry's mind, the ability for him to quote unquote joke with Zeke would be, in his mind, he stood behind Zeke through all the legal drama that he's had in the past. So he feels like, oh, I can pretty much say whatever I want to Zeke and he can't take it to heart. But that is, he's not joking. He's pretty much like, we don't need Zeke. He did the same thing with Emmitt Smith back in the day when Emmitt Smith wanted more money and held out. He said that we didn't need him either. But they ended up needing him. They went 0-2 without Emmitt. Emmitt re-signed with them after going the 0-2, and then they went on to win the Super Bowl that year. So they definitely need Zeke, and Jerry is definitely not helping his case with Zeke this year.
Do you think it's more of a power thing from Jerry Jones' standpoint, right? Like, I'm the owner, I'm the billionaire, this is my team, so I can say whatever I want, right? And you guys sort of have to suck it up. And do you think he's sort of trying to bully Zeke into coming back? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I could see him thinking that he could just bully Zeke into it. He's the billionaire. The team is his plaything, so he can do whatever he wants with it. I mean, hell, he has press conferences. What other owner has press conferences for their team unless they're introducing a coach or whatnot? So I do think he is trying to bully Zeke. He's also trying to be like, oh, we're good without him, whereas they are not good without him.
Well, I definitely think it was one of the bigger power moves, the fact they decided to extend Jalen Smith 5 years, $64 million, $35 million guaranteed. Now, Jalen Smith, we were talking about this a couple weeks ago. We expected this extension to be delayed another year. So one of my big fights with this whole Zeke holdout in general was that he was skipping in line. In ways, it's kind of interesting for Jerry to skip line in terms of skipping over Amari, skipping over Dak, and skipping over Zeke to pay Jalen Smith. Now, granted, I do think that Smith is one of the better young linebackers in the league. His story overcoming that knee injury was amazing, and it tells you he's a high-quality character guy, and I do think then that's kind of what Jerry wants on his roster long term. Do you have any kind of thoughts on the Jalen Smith extension before we move on?
Yeah, so Jalen Smith, he is going to be a free agent was going to be a free agent at the end of this year. I was surprised. I thought maybe they would have waited till either mid-season or the end of the season to get him. But the interesting part was during the press conference for the extension, somebody asked Jerry a question about what does this mean for the Dak, Amari, and Zeke extensions. And he said, this means less pie to go around. So even now he's testing, Dak, who wants $40 million a year. We haven't heard anything from Amari Cooper. And then we know Zeke wants to be, right around $13 million a year with all the other top backs in the league. So this definitely does mess with their money, essentially, going forward.
I also wonder if it messes with the team dynamics, right? So you have these, 3 offensive, weapons, right, that all want to get paid, that all think they're at least top 5, right, deserving of top 5. And you could argue about statistics and all of that, but so they all want to get paid good money. And now you have an owner, right, the owner that you play for, basically saying, hey, screw all of you guys. I'm going, to pay one of my defensive guys, and he's going to skip ahead of you, right? So I think in some ways, I don't know if Jerry intentionally wants to send this signal, but it's kind of a signal that, hey, I don't really care about you guys, right? You guys just follow mine when I tell you to.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting situation to definitely monitor going through, especially with Zeke saying that he's not going to play this year without a contract extension.
Well, we talked about this. If Zeke doesn't play this year, he's going to have to play for the Cowboys next year. He doesn't get that year of league eligibility under his belt, so he just basically rolls over his contract every year he decides not to play until the point where he's not good enough to play. So at some point, he's going to have to suit up. He's going to have to realize that there's a lot of money on the line. It's not like he's getting paid nothing to play football this season. He is still getting paid a top 5 pick salary. So it's going to be interesting to see where this story develops, if it carries into the regular season. The Cowboys definitely do have a light regular season to start off. Although it does include 2 divisional games, they are going to be against the Redskins, the Giants, and I believe they're playing the Dolphins in that first 3 weeks. So they should be fine until they face the Saints in week 4.
Do you think it's possible for NFL players, right? You see this in the NBA sometimes, where a player will just say, hey, no, I'm hurt, right? And so they're still on the team, they're there, and they're quote-unquote hurt, right? We saw this a little bit with Anthony Davis and some of the other players. Do you think it's possible for an NFL player to do that, to come back, maybe play a game, and then say, oh, no, I'm hurt, I'm injured, I can't perform?
It is possible. I highly doubt that would happen in Jerry's house, quote-unquote. But, I mean, I've never seen it in the NFL. The NFL players don't get enough leeway as the NBA players do. They have more power in their league than the NFL players do. So I don't see that happening. It would be very interesting to see that happen. Zeke go out there and say, oh, I pulled a hammy, and then he just has a hammy issue all year long. It would be very interesting to see that play out if that were to go that route.
Plus, eventually we're going to be talking about Zeke and Melvin Gordon's situation as a whole. If they do carry in the regular season, they can potentially be devalued by how their backups perform in their roles. We still haven't even seen how the Bell saga has come full circle quite yet, because we don't know how Bell's going to perform in his first year returning from a year layoff. So I'm interested to see how the Jets do, because that's also going to set precedent for what happens in the Zeke and Gordon situations as well. Now, as much as we're worried about Zeke returning to training camp, there is one more possible notable return coming up in the next few weeks. So Dwight Howard has been talked about returning to the Lakers. Now, Aundre, as a Lakers fan, would you support Dwight coming back?
Absolutely not. So there's a lot of people so I have to laugh, because to me it's just so ridiculous. Like, I would not want him back. He's been on, I think it's like 5 teams in 5 years or something.
Played for the whole Wizards and them conference, or division.
Exactly, and he's been shipped around from Houston, Orlando. So what I find difficult with the Lakers, so I think the Lakers will always be tied to any big name. So if you at any one time, right, we're a big time player, whether you're an MVP caliber player or even just an all-star, your name sort of gets tied to the Lakers. In Dwight Howard's case, one, he's had way too many injuries for my liking, right? So there's been times where he's had back issues and knee issues. And so he has a ton of injuries that, one, I just wouldn't want to deal with if I'm the Lakers. And you already have sort of a dead roster spot with Boogie Cousins, right? So you need to get the best out of that last roster spot that you have. And with this team and with the way the league is, there's a ton of really tough teams. It's sort of wide open, right? So you've got the Clippers are going to be really good. Denver's going to be really good. Philly's going to be good. The Raptors still will be good. Golden State will still be all right. And so you need to make the best use of every single roster spot. And to me, Dwight Howard is not that good of a use. And then the biggest thing is just the locker room issues, right? So right now, the Lakers, in my opinion, have a pretty good locker room. I know that that sometimes people have said LeBron can be divisive, right? I think they got rid of all the young players, so I think LeBron respects veterans a lot more. I think he, hopefully respects Kyle Kuzma and Alex Caruso, especially since the Lakers fought so hard to keep them. So I think right now the locker room is going to be really good. And if you bring Dwight Howard in, it could completely change that dynamic. Plus, I just don't know the production you would get out of him.
Yeah, because you're going to need a big man, especially right now, to help out with minutes. Because right now you just have JaVale McGee slotted in that spot. I don't know how much you're going to want to play LeBron or AD in that center spot. You're going to want somebody to slide into that role, eat up minutes, rebound, take kind of that brunt of the inside work. Yeah,
and the biggest thing here, right, is technically, at least from a basketball standpoint, I think the best lineup, at least offensively, but even defensively would be really good, would actually be to move Anthony Davis up to the 5 spot, right? So you can have Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Kyle Kuzma, Danny Green, and maybe like an Avery Bradley type or an Alex Caruso type. And that to me is the ideal lineup for the Lakers. But AD has been very vocal that he does not want to play center that much, right? And so AD can also technically walk at the end of this year. So in order to keep him happy, the Lakers kind of have to say, okay, we're going to play you at power forward, and we'll get somebody else for center.
Yeah, you don't want to lose him to the Clippers, where you've already lost 2 players to the Clippers.
Yeah,
you don't want to,
and a coach, right?
You don't want a third player going in your house, essentially, but playing for the Clippers.
Yep.
Well, let's just play devil's advocate and say, let's say the Lakers do sign Dwight. What role do you think he would bring to that team?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think he would be really good at rebounding and defensively. And so if he comes in with the second unit and every now and again with the first unit, right, he can sort of be that big defensive presence that you need. He could be really good at rebounding, right? And if he's close to the basket, he can score pretty decently as long as, he's healthy, like I said. And so I think he would be that sort of extra juice that the second unit would need, especially when we're resting some of our starters. Now, the Lakers have come out and said, hey, LeBron James or Anthony Davis will be on the court at all times, right? So I think that Dwight Howard could possibly pair really well with, whoever it is on the court at that time, helping to alleviate some of the burden on just one of our superstars. The other thing, though, that I will say is if you do sign him to, just the minimum contract, you can move off of him pretty easily, right? So you could simply cut him, and sure, you lose the cap space, or you take your salary hit or whatever it is. But it's not that difficult to get rid of a veteran minimum player if he's willing to sign for that.
So with that said, before we move on to our NFC, AFC West divisional breakdowns, I just want to say on a somber note, we want to remember Cedric Benson, who passed this past week. He was 36 years old. He played for the Bears, Bengals, and Packers. But more importantly, in my community, living out here in Austin, Texas, he was a University of Texas alumni. He was a high school football legend in the state of Texas, which obviously we know how big that is. But, I want to remember Cedric Benson, the person, too. Before this incident happened with him crashing a motorcycle, he was instrumental in helping rebuild the homes of Austin residents that were affected by the Austin bomber. This took place in 2018, and he really helped change those people's lives. He would go read to school children on his off time as just Cedric. And I think that remembering Cedric Benson, the person, is really big in these moments. And I also want to remember the passenger who was with Cedric when this happened. She was 27 years old, a former UT alum herself, who had big dreams and aspirations, I'm sure. So condolences to both their families.